Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that, well, it seems incredibly simple on the surface, right? Keeping your word. But as you'll see, a simple promise actually acts as the ultimate connective tissue across Islamic theology, family life, and even complex global business. We're talking about the profound weight of a promise. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the weight of a promise, look at the Prophet's example, dive into promises in family life, scale up to Islamic business and contracts, and finally wrap up with when promises can actually break. So let's jump right into part 1, the weight of a promise. Now, this famous hadith is absolutely crucial because it establishes the highest possible spiritual stakes. It links broken promises directly to hypocrisy. By placing a broken promise right alongside lying and betrayal, it shows us that keeping your word is a core metric of true faith. In fact, classical sources note that the hypocrites are said to be placed in the lowest depths of the fire, which really just shows you how serious this is. You see, a promise in Islam is never just a casual, everyday social convention. It's deeply woven into the very fabric of the faith itself. Making an agreement with another person fundamentally involves making a vow in the presence of the divine. As the Quran states in Surah An-Nahl, when you confirm an oath, you've literally made God your surety. You aren't just letting down a friend or a colleague. You're breaking a spiritual pledge witnessed by God himself. When you zoom out to a societal level, it's like a giant puzzle. Communities that actually keep their covenants become these tightly knit, well-organized, trusting units, completely free from perpetual conflict. When everyone's word is their bond, the entire community thrives in this state of mutual assurance and security. That spiritual commitment, it provides the absolute bedrock for a functional, thriving society. Moving on to part 2, the Prophet's example. The Prophet Muhammad emphasized fulfilling promises to children without fail. He totally recognized their innocent trust and the fact that they rely on adults for literally everything as their providers. This essentially sets the gold standard for early childhood development, directly linking these massive divine covenants to how we treat the youngest, most vulnerable among us. And this mindset extends to basically all aspects of life. Ali, the commander of the faithful, actually echoed this exact sentiment, advising that you should never, ever make a promise or guarantee that you cannot absolutely discharge. Truthfulness in our everyday interactions isn't just a nice character trait, it's an absolute prerequisite for piety and earning the love of the divine. Okay, let's look at part 3, promises in family life. So, this forces us to ask a pretty tough question. Can children raised on false promises actually grow into respectable adults? The family living room is essentially ground zero. It's the primary training ground where the habit of keeping covenants is either built up or completely destroyed. When parents take their small promises lightly and just brush them off, the child adopts this negative worldview, and they start to believe that promises are simply made to be broken. We've all seen this, right? Promising sweets to get a kid to take bitter medicine, or falsely promising a toy just to get them through a vaccination, or even making empty threats about calling the police to get a child to behave. These are innocent, but incredibly destructive traps. Inadvertently, parents are teaching their children that words are just convenient tools to escape a stressful moment. Because children are basically little sponges. They emulate the actions and words of their parents. They take these negative examples right to heart, adopting a whole culture of breaking one's word. It's absolutely crucial to remember that protecting a child's impressionable mind from the injustice of false promises isn't just good parenting. It's a direct religious obligation. All right, let's shift gears to part 4, Islamic business and contracts. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The exact same ethical principles we just talked about in the family living room, they are tightly woven into multi-million-dollar contracts in Islamic finance. We're moving from the intimacy of your home straight into the complex, macro world of global financial markets, where the religious concept of a promise literally dictates the legal architecture of capital. Okay, let's dive into a bit of a technical distinction here. In Islamic finance, you have a wad, which is a one-way, unilateral promise to deliver something good, versus a muwada'ah, which is a bilateral, mutual undertaking between two parties. That difference between a one-way promise and a two-way mutual promise dictates exactly how sophisticated financial products can be legally structured under Sharia law. To put that into perspective, industry researchers spend a lot of time analyzing specific sukuk, or Islamic bond structures, like the Ingress and Dubai deals, to make sure they don't violate these fundamental rules of promises. For instance, if two promises in a deal share the exact same trigger events and exercise prices, researchers argue it might resemble a bilateral muwada, and a bilateral promise has entirely different legal requirements than two independent unilateral promises. So why does this level of intense magnifying glass scrutiny even exist? Well, just like breaking a promise to a child causes psychological harm, breaking the structural rules of a financial promise causes real systemic harm. Violating these strict guidelines doesn't secure market benefits, it fundamentally shatters the integrity of the whole institution. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, when promises can break. Now, Islam is a pragmatic religion. It acknowledges human reality. Keeping a promise isn't just this blind, rigid absolute if it's going to force you into sin. Valid exceptions include genuine forgetfulness, being physically forced or detained, or facing unforeseen emergencies, like, say, a sudden illness. But most importantly, you absolutely cannot fulfill a promise to do something forbidden. There's a really famous historical example of Aisha, the Prophet's wife, who actually legally broke a condition with a freed slave's former masters because their initial condition directly violated Islamic rulings. But what if you break a promise and you just don't have a valid excuse? Well, Islam provides a very specific path to atonement. If you break an oath, you have to make up for it by feeding or clothing 10 poor people. If you can't do that, you must fast for 3 days. This requirement is brilliant because it links your broken word to a direct act of charity or self-discipline, restoring your spiritual balance and making amends to the community. So, knowing that every single commitment you make is witnessed by the divine, how will the weight of a covenant shape the promises you make today? Whether you're structuring a multi-million-dollar global financial contract or simply promising your kid an ice cream cone after school, the spiritual stakes are exactly the same. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Take this high-stakes framework into your daily interactions, and seriously, never underestimate the power of keeping your word.